The blood-red sunset painted Zachary Irwin's silhouette against the Wyoming sky as he rode into Fort Collins for the first time in 7 years. His face, partially hidden beneath his wide-brimmed hat, bore the marks of a man who'd seen too much of the world's cruelty. It was 1876, and the West was still wild enough to swallow a man whole if he wasn't careful. Zach had the scars to prove it, both the ones visible to the eye and those hidden beneath his weathered clothing. The main street was busier than he remembered. Progress had marched on without him. New storefronts lined the dirt road, and the sound of a piano drifted from the saloon. Zach guided his chestnut mare toward the livery stable, his body aching from the long journey from Texas. He hadn't planned on returning to Colorado, but fate had other ideas. "Need a stall for your horse, mister?" The stable boy couldn't have been more than 16, all gangly limbs and curious eyes. "Just for a week or so," Zach replied, his voice rough from disuse. He dismounted with practiced ease, though the old injury in his right leg made itself known. "Treat her well. She's earned her rest." After settling his mount, Zach collected his saddlebags and Winchester rifle, then made his way toward the hotel. His spurs jangled with each step, announcing his presence to anyone who cared to listen. Few did. Fort Collins had grown too much to take notice of yet another dusty traveler. The hotel lobby was modest but clean. The woman behind the counter glanced up as the door swung open, her eyes widening slightly at the sight of him. "I need a room," Zach said, placing a few coins on the counter. She pushed a ledger toward him. "Sign here, please. How long will you be staying?" "Not sure yet." He scrawled his name in the book, keeping his head down, the brim of his hat hiding the jagged scar that ran from his right temple to his jaw. "Room 7, top of the stairs." She slid a key across the counter, careful not to touch his fingers. "There's a bathhouse around back if you're interested." Zach pocketed the key without comment and headed upstairs. The room was plain: a bed, a washstand, a small window overlooking the main street. It was more luxury than he'd known in years. He placed his rifle against the wall, dropped his saddlebags on the floor, and sat heavily on the bed. He hadn't come back for nostalgia. He'd come because of a letter from an old friend, now the sheriff, warning that Jacob Thornton had been released from prison. The same Jacob Thornton who had sworn vengeance against Zach for putting him behind bars. The same man who had given Zach most of his scars during their last encounter. After washing the trail dust from his face, being careful around the tender scar tissue, Zach headed downstairs. He needed information, and saloons were always the best place to start. The Rusty Nail was doing brisk business despite the early evening hour. Zach pushed through the batwing doors, his eyes quickly scanning the room from habit, noting exits, counting armed men, assessing threats. The piano player was hammering out a lively tune while a barmaid with tired eyes delivered whiskey to thirsty cowboys. Zach made his way to the bar, keeping his back to the wall. "Whiskey," he told the barkeep, sliding a coin across the polished wood. "You're new in town," the man observed, pouring amber liquid into a reasonably clean glass. "Just passing through," Zach lied easily. "Looking for work, maybe?" "What kind of work?" "The kind that pays." He took a sip of the whiskey, welcoming the burn. "Heard the Circle H might be hiring." The barkeep's expression shifted slightly. "Circle H is Olivia Harrington's place now. Has been since her pa passed last winter. She's doing her best, but it's hard for a woman alone." He leaned closer. "Though she's got more grit than most men I know." Zach filed away the information. "That's so." "Where would I find her?" "She comes to town most Saturdays for supplies. Otherwise, the ranch is about 10 miles north." The barkeep moved away to serve another customer, leaving Zach to his thoughts. As if summoned by their conversation, the saloon doors swung open and a woman entered. She wasn't dressed like the saloon girls, no bright satin or excessive feathers. Instead, she wore practical riding clothes, a split skirt, sturdy boots, and a white blouse beneath a fitted jacket. Her auburn hair was pulled back in a simple knot, and she moved with the confident stride of someone who knew her own worth. Conversations quieted briefly at her entrance before resuming. This was clearly not an unusual sight. The woman scanned the room, nodded to a few patrons, then approached the bar a few feet from Zach. "Evening, Miss Harrington," the barkeep said, confirming Zach's suspicion. "The usual. Thanks, Tom." Her voice was lower than Zach expected, melodic but with a thread of steel running through it. "And any news about those cattle buyers?" "Nothing yet, but Wilson at the bank says he's expecting word any day." She nodded, accepting a glass of what looked like sherry. "I need that sale to go through before winter." There was worry beneath her composed expression. Zach studied her from beneath the brim of his hat. Olivia Harrington was younger than he'd expected, perhaps 25, with intelligent eyes and a determined set to her jaw. She felt his gaze and turned, her green eyes meeting his directly. "Something I can help you with, mister?" "No fear, just straightforward inquiry." "Just enjoying my drink," Zach replied, tipping his hat slightly. She assessed him openly, taking in the scar visible on his face, his worn clothes, the gun holstered at his hip. "You're new in town." "Just arrived today. Looking for work." He hadn't expected such directness. "Might be. Good with horses. Raised them most of my life." She nodded once, decision made. "Circle H could use another hand at least through the autumn. Pays fair, bunkhouse is clean. If you're interested, be at the North Road by sunrise tomorrow. My foreman will be bringing a wagon for supplies." Before he could respond, a commotion erupted at the poker table across the room. A red-faced cowboy stood abruptly, accusing another player of cheating. Hands moved toward guns. "Not again," Olivia muttered, then raised her voice. "Jackson. Remember what happened last time you caused trouble in here?" The standing man hesitated, then slowly sat back down. "Just a misunderstanding, Miss Harrington." She turned back to Zach. "Tomorrow, sunrise." Then she drained her glass and departed, leaving Zach staring after her. Taking the job would complicate his real purpose in Fort Collins, but it might also provide cover while he waited for Thornton to show. And something about Olivia Harrington intrigued him. Behind her businesslike demeanor, he'd glimpsed something familiar, a person fighting to hold their world together. He knew that fight all too well. Morning came too soon, the pale light filtering through the thin hotel curtains. Zach dressed quickly, checked his weapons, and made his way downstairs. The town was just beginning to stir as he collected his horse from the livery and rode to the northern edge of Fort Collins. A wagon was already waiting, loaded with barrels and crates. A grizzled man in his 50s sat holding the reins, smoking a hand-rolled cigarette. "You the new hand?" the man asked as Zach approached. "Name's Zachary Irwin." He'd considered using a false name but had decided against it. If Thornton was coming for him, hiding wouldn't help. "Cal Weber." "I run things for Miss Harrington." Cal eyed him critically. "She mentioned you might show. Can you handle yourself on a ranch?" "I can," Cal grunted. "We'll see. Follow the wagon. It's about 2 hours' ride." The journey passed in relative silence. As they cleared the last foothills, Zach saw the Circle H spread out before them, a large ranch house with a barn, corral, bunkhouse, and various outbuildings. A creek ran through the property, and cattle grazed in the distance. It was impressive, though he noted signs of strain, fences in need of repair, fewer cattle than the land could support. As they pulled into the yard, Olivia emerged from the house. In the clear morning light, Zach could see her features better, the light dusting of freckles across her nose, the determined set of her mouth, the intelligence in her eyes. "Mr. Irwin," she greeted him. "You decided to come. You offered work. I need it." It wasn't entirely a lie. "Cal will show you around and explain your duties. We've got a shipment of horses coming in tomorrow that need breaking. I'm told you're good with them." "Good enough." She studied him for a moment. "The scar on your face. Knife." The question caught him off guard. Most people pretended not to notice his scars, or worse, stared but never asked. "Yes. Must have been a close fight." "Too close," he admitted. Something passed between them, a moment of recognition, perhaps. Then she was all business again. "Get settled in. We start work at dawn." The next few days fell into a rhythm. Zach rose before sunrise each morning, worked with the other hands, 3 men besides Cal, and spent his days mending fences, tending livestock, and breaking the new horses. The work was hard but honest, and it gave him a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in years. He learned that Olivia's father had died, leaving significant debts, and she was fighting to keep the ranch afloat. The cattle sale she'd mentioned was crucial. Without it, she might lose everything. One evening, a week after his arrival, Zach was working late in the barn when Olivia appeared in the doorway, holding a lantern. "You're still up," she observed, stepping inside. She'd changed from her work clothes into a simple dress, her hair loose around her shoulders. The lantern light softened her features, making her look younger, more vulnerable. "Just finishing up," Zach replied, setting down the saddle he'd been repairing. "You've been working harder than men I pay twice as much." She approached, setting the lantern on a barrel. "Why? Work needs doing." "That's not an answer," Zach sighed. "I like being busy." She studied him with those perceptive green eyes. "You're running from something, aren't we all?" He tried to turn away, but she moved closer. "Most men with scars like yours tell stories about them, exaggerate them. You hide yours." It wasn't a question. "Nothing to tell that's worth hearing." "I disagree." She reached out, her fingers stopping just short of the scar on his face. "Every scar has a story. They're proof you survived something that tried to kill you." Her words hit him like a physical blow. He'd never thought of his scars that way, only as reminders of failure, of pain, of loss. "Some things should stay buried," he said quietly, "and some things fester if they're not faced." She lowered her hand. "My father used to say that. Smart man. Stubborn man." A small smile touched her lips. "Like someone else I'm getting to know." She picked up the lantern. "Don't stay up too late, Mr. Irwin. Those horses won't break themselves tomorrow." As she walked away, Zach found himself watching her longer than he should have. Olivia Harrington was dangerous in ways that had nothing to do with guns or knives. She saw too much, asked questions others avoided, and worst of all, made him want to answer them. The next day brought news from town. The cattle buyers were coming in 3 days. The mood at the ranch lifted immediately. If the sale went through, it would mean security through winter and beyond. That afternoon, Zach was working with a particularly stubborn Mustang when he spotted a rider approaching from the east. Something about the man's silhouette set off warnings in his mind. He handed the horse's reins to another ranch hand and moved toward the house, where Olivia was reviewing accounts on the porch. "Someone's coming," he said quietly. She looked up, squinting at the distant rider. "Not expecting anyone today. Might be nothing." But his hand drifted toward his gun anyway. As the rider drew closer, Zach's suspicions eased. It wasn't Thornton. This man was older, thinner, dressed like a townsman rather than an outlaw. "Miss Harrington," the man called as he approached, removing his hat. "I've come from the bank in Fort Collins." Olivia stood, her expression carefully neutral. "Mr. Patterson, what brings you all this way?" The banker dismounted, looking uncomfortable. "I'm afraid I have news about the cattle buyers." "They're still coming." Patterson cleared his throat. "No, madam, they've purchased elsewhere. They won't be needing your stock." Zach watched the color drain from Olivia's face, though her composure never faltered. I see. Did they say why? Market prices, apparently. They found cheaper stock down south. Patterson fidgeted with his hat. Miss Harrington, about the loan payment due at the end of the month. I'll have it, she said firmly, one way or another. The bank can't extend any further credit. Mr. Wilson was quite clear. I understand, Mr. Patterson. Thank you for riding out to tell me personally. After the banker departed, Olivia remained on the porch, staring at the distant mountains. Zach approached cautiously. Bad news? He asked, though the answer was obvious. Nothing I can't handle. Her voice was steady, but he could see the tension in her shoulders. The ranch has faced worse. What will you do? Find new buyers, quickly. She turned to face him. Mr. Irwin, I may need to reduce staff until things improve. I'm the newest hire. Makes sense to let me go first, she shook her head. Actually, you're the best with horses I've seen in years. I was thinking of offering you a permanent position, but now, she sighed. I can't promise steady work past the month. I don't need promises. The words came without thought. I'll stay as long as I'm needed. Something in her expression softened. Thank you. That evening, Zach rode into town. He needed to check if there was any word about Thornton, and he had an idea that might help Olivia's situation. The sheriff's office was his first stop. Sheriff Marcus Dawson was an old friend they'd ridden together years ago before Zach had gone south to Texas. Marcus had aged well, his dark hair now threaded with silver, but his eyes still sharp. Heard you were back, Marcus said, pouring 2 cups of coffee. Staying at the Circle H, for now. Zach accepted the coffee. Any word on Thornton? Nothing yet. But he'll come, Zach. Men like that always do, I know, that's why I'm here. He took a sip of the bitter coffee. There's another matter. The Circle H is in trouble. Cattle buyers backed out. Marcus nodded, not surprised. The market's been unpredictable. Olivia's a good woman trying to keep that place together since her father died. She needs to sell those cattle. I thought you might know potential buyers. Why do you care? Marcus eyed him curiously. You just started working there. Zach shifted uncomfortably. Just seems wrong. Good ranch, hard worker. A knowing smile crossed Marcus's face. I might know someone. Army's looking for beef to supply the fort up north. Not top dollar, but better than nothing. That could work. I'll send a telegram tomorrow. Marcus leaned back in his chair. Now about Thornton. When he comes and he will, I want to be ready. This is my fight, Marcus. This is my town. And you're my friend. Zach nodded slowly. Fair enough. When he returned to the ranch the following day, he said nothing about his conversation with Marcus. No sense giving Olivia false hope. Instead, he threw himself into work, breaking horses, repairing fences, and helping Cal organize the remaining hands. The ranch was running with minimal staff now, everyone working double shifts to keep things going. 3 days later, a military wagon arrived at the ranch. A lieutenant and 2 soldiers dismounted and asked to speak with Miss Harrington. Zach watched from the corral as Olivia met them on the porch, her back straight, her manner composed despite the pressure she must have been feeling. The conversation lasted nearly an hour. When the soldiers departed, Olivia remained on the porch, looking thoughtful. Zach approached, wiping his hands on a rag. Army business? He asked casually. A small smile touched her lips. Apparently, Fort Laramie needs beef. They've offered to buy half my herd at a fair price. She gave him a considering look. Strange coincidence, them showing up right when I needed them most. Zach shrugged. Good luck. Was it luck, Mr. Irwin? Or did you have something to do with this? Just a ranch hand, madam. A ranch hand who happens to be old friends with Sheriff Dawson. Her eyes held his. Cal mentioned seeing you 2 talking in town. Zach realized he'd been caught. Marcus knows people. I just suggested he might put in a word. Instead of the anger or pride he'd expected, Olivia's expression softened. "Thank you," she stepped closer. "Why did you help? You barely know me or this ranch." The truth was, he wasn't entirely sure himself. Seemed like the right thing to do. "There's more to you than you let on, Zachary Irwin." She reached out, her fingers lightly touching the back of his hand. Much more. The simple contact sent an unexpected jolt through him. It had been so long since anyone had touched him with kindness rather than violence. He withdrew his hand, uncomfortable with the feelings it stirred. "I should get back to work," he said gruffly. Her smile suggested she understood more than he wanted her to. "Of course." The cattle drive to Fort Laramie took 4 days. Zach, Cal, and the remaining hands moved half the herd north, while Olivia rode ahead to finalize the paperwork. The work was exhausting but satisfying, and when they finally delivered the cattle, the payment was enough to keep the Circle H running through winter and beyond. The return journey was lighter, their mission accomplished. They camped the last night a few miles from the ranch, and Zach found himself sitting by the fire with Olivia after the others had turned in. "You're good at this," she said, watching him as he tended the flames. "Ranch work suits you." "Used to have a spread of my own, small place in Texas." It was the first personal information he'd volunteered, and she seemed to recognize its significance. "What happened to it?" He stared into the fire. "Lost it. Bad investments, worse friends. Then the war came." He touched the scar on his face absently. "Nothing left to go back to after. I'm sorry." Her voice was soft in the darkness, long time ago now. "Is that when you got that scar?" He shook his head. "That came later, after I became a marshal." Her eyebrows rose. "You were a lawman." "For a few years, down in Texas." The flames danced before him, bringing back memories he tried to bury. Tracked a gang that had been terrorizing settlements along the border. Jacob Thornton and his men. "Thornton," she repeated. "I've heard that name. You would have. He was infamous. Killed dozens, including women and children." The old anger rose in his throat. "I caught up to them near El Paso. There was a fight. I got Thornton, but not before he got to me first." In the firelight, he could see understanding dawn in her eyes. "That's why you're here, in Fort Collins." "He was released from prison 3 months ago. Word is he's coming for me." Zach met her gaze directly. "I should have told you. Having me here puts your ranch at risk." "Is that why you helped with the cattle sale? Guilt?" "No," he said honestly. "That was for you." Something shifted between them in that moment, a recognition, a possibility. Olivia moved closer on the log where they sat, her shoulder nearly touching his. "Everyone has ghosts, Zachary, and scars." She pushed up her sleeve, revealing a jagged white line that ran from her wrist halfway to her elbow. "Fell from a horse when I was 12. Bone broke through the skin." Without thinking, he traced the line with his finger. "Must have hurt. Terribly. But I got back on that same horse the day the doctor took the splint off." Her voice lowered. "My father taught me that falling isn't the shame, not getting back up is." Wise man. "Yes, he was." She didn't pull her arm away from his touch. "Your scars tell me the same story, that you got back up." Their eyes met, and for a moment, Zach forgot about Thornton, about danger, about all the reasons he'd kept people at a distance for years. He saw only her brave, determined, seeing through his defenses as if they weren't there. A log shifted in the fire, sending sparks upward, breaking the moment. Zach withdrew his hand. "We should get some sleep. Long ride tomorrow." Olivia nodded, though something like disappointment flickered across her features. "Good night, Zachary." As he lay in his bedroll later, listening to the night sounds of the prairie, Zach realized he was in trouble. Not just from Thornton, but from feelings he'd thought long dead. Feelings for a woman who deserved better than a scarred ex-lawman with enemies and nightmares. They returned to the Circle H the following day. Life at the ranch settled into a more comfortable rhythm now that immediate financial disaster had been averted. Zach continued working, though he kept his eyes open for any sign of Thornton. 2 weeks passed. Summer was fading into early autumn, the nights growing cooler. Zach found himself spending more evenings on the porch of the main house, sometimes in silence, sometimes in conversation with Olivia as they watched the sunset. They talked of horses, cattle, the changing weather-safe topics that nonetheless built a bridge between them. One evening, as they sat drinking coffee, Olivia asked, "Do you ever think of having your own ranch again?" The question took him by surprise. "Not really, not for a long time." "Why not? You have a gift for it." He considered his answer carefully. "After everything." It seemed easier to keep moving. No roots, no attachments, no disappointments. And no joy either, she observed. No home. Home is overrated. Is it? She set down her cup. "I think home is the only thing worth fighting for." Before he could respond, the sound of approaching horses drew their attention. 3 riders were coming up the road to the ranch, moving fast. Zach was on his feet instantly, hand moving to his gun. "Get inside," he told Olivia. "This is my ranch, I don't hide." She stood beside him, watching the approaching riders. As they drew closer, Zach relaxed slightly. It was Marcus, accompanied by 2 deputies. They pulled up in front of the porch, dust billowing around them. "Evening, Olivia," Marcus called, removing his hat. "Zach." "Sheriff," Olivia acknowledged. "What brings you out this way?" Marcus's expression was grim. "Information. Thornton was spotted in Denver 3 days ago, heading this way with 2 men. Zach felt a cold weight settle in his stomach. "You're sure?" "Positive. My counterpart in Denver recognized him from the wanted circulars I sent out." Olivia glanced between them. "So he's coming. What do we do?" "We." Zach turned to her. "There's no we in this, Olivia. This is my fight. On my land," she countered. "That makes it my concern." Marcus interrupted before they could argue further. "I'm deputizing extra men in town. Thornton's not just your problem, Zach. He's wanted for 2 murders since his release. But knowing him, he'll try to catch you alone. Then I should leave." Zach looked at Olivia. "Draw him away from here." "No," she said firmly. "That's exactly what he wants, you isolated, vulnerable." "She's right," Marcus agreed. "Better to face him with allies." The discussion continued well into the night. Plans were made, precautions taken. Marcus left 2 deputies at the ranch, with promises to send more men if needed. The hands were warned, the house secured. Later, as Zach checked the windows and doors one last time, Olivia found him in the parlor. "You should get some sleep," she said. "You'll need your strength." "I'm fine." She moved closer, studying his face in the lamplight. "No, you're not. You're worried. Not for yourself, but for everyone else. Thornton doesn't care who gets hurt. He'll go through anyone to get to me. Which is why you need people around you, not pushed away." She reached up, her fingers gently touching the scar on his face. This time he didn't pull away. "These scars you hate so much, they're not your shame, Zachary. They're your strength. They show what you've endured." Her touch was gentle, her words even more so. Something broke open inside him, a dam holding back years of pain, regret, and loneliness. "I got my partners killed," he confessed, the words tumbling out. "When we cornered Thornton's gang, 3 good men died because I insisted on pushing forward instead of waiting for reinforcements." He closed his eyes, feeling the weight of the memory. "Thornton gave me these scars, but the worst ones can't be seen. The guilt, the knowledge that they died because of my arrogance." "Look at me," Olivia said softly. When he opened his eyes, her face was closer, her gaze steady. "You made a choice. It had consequences, terrible ones, but you survived for a reason, Zachary. What reason could possibly justify their deaths? Maybe to stop Thornton from hurting others. Maybe to be here now." Her hand moved to rest against his chest over his heart. Maybe for this. The distance between them disappeared as she leaned forward and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, but deepened as he responded, his arms encircling her waist, drawing her closer. Years of loneliness and self-imposed isolation melted away in the warmth of her embrace. When they finally parted, both breathing hard, Zach rested his forehead against hers. "This is a mistake. I'm not staying. I can't stay. Why not? You know why. I'm not the settling kind anymore." "I don't believe that." Her hands framed his face. "I think you're afraid to want something permanent again, afraid to lose it. Aren't you afraid of Thornton? Of what could happen? Of course I am. But fear isn't a good enough reason to stop living." She kissed him again briefly. "And neither is guilt." They stayed that way for a long moment, holding each other in the quiet house. Eventually, Olivia stepped back. "Get some rest," she said. "Tomorrow will come early enough." As he watched her walk away, Zach realized that he now had even more reason to fear Thornton's arrival. Before, he'd only worried about his own life. Now, he had someone to lose. The next 2 days passed in tense anticipation. Ranch work continued, but everyone was on alert. The deputies patrolled the property, and Zach taught the ranch hands basic defensive tactics. Olivia insisted on learning to shoot better, so he spent hours with her at the makeshift shooting range behind the barn. "You're a natural," he told her, watching as she hit the target consistently. "Steady hands." "Steady heart," she corrected, lowering the rifle. "My father always said that was more important than aim." He wasn't wrong. They shared a smile, one of many small moments of connection that were becoming increasingly frequent between them. Despite the danger hanging over them, or perhaps because of it, their feelings for each other had grown rapidly. That evening they sat on the porch swing, watching the sunset. Olivia's hand was in his, her head resting against his shoulder. It felt right in a way nothing had for years. "Tell me about your ranch in Texas," she said. "The one you lost. It wasn't much. 100 acres, small herd cabin I built myself." He found it easier to talk about the past now. "Good water, decent grazing. I had plans to expand." "What happened exactly?" "Trusted the wrong people. My partner embezzled our profits, took loans against the property without my knowledge. By the time I discovered it, we were ruined." He squeezed her hand. "Then the war came. I enlisted. When I returned, the bank had foreclosed. I'm sorry. It was a lesson, one I needed to learn." She lifted her head to look at him. "What lesson? Not to trust, something like that." "That's a terrible lesson." Her green eyes held his. "Trust is everything, Zachary, in business, in friendship, in love." The word hung between them, neither acknowledging nor denying it. "What would you do if you could start over?" she asked after a moment. "If Thornton was no longer a threat and you were free to choose." He hadn't allowed himself to think that far ahead in years. "I don't know. Maybe find a small place, raise horses. Here in Colorado." The question held more than casual interest, and they both knew it. "Maybe. The land is good here." She smiled, satisfied with his answer for now. They sat in companionable silence as the last light faded from the sky, stars appearing one by one above them. It was nearly midnight when they heard a single gunshot from the direction of the bunkhouse, followed by shouts. Zach was on his feet instantly, gun drawn. "Stay inside," he told Olivia, but she was already reaching for the rifle they'd kept by the door. "Not a chance." Before they could argue further, one of the deputies ran toward the house. "Riders, coming fast from the east." Zach peered into the darkness. 3 mounted figures were approaching, firing as they came. One of the ranch hands fell, clutching his leg. The deputies returned fire, forcing the attackers to split up. "It's Thornton," Zach said grimly. "I recognize his riding style." The largest of the three riders circled toward the barn while the others provided covering fire. Zach knew what they were doing, separating, making themselves harder targets, creating confusion. "Get to the cellar," he told Olivia. "There's only one entrance. You can defend it. And leave you out here alone." "No." A bullet splintered the porch railing beside them. Zach pulled Olivia behind the solid wall of the house. "This isn't a discussion," he said. "I need to know you're safe so I can focus on Thornton, and I need to know you're not sacrificing yourself out of some misplaced guilt." Her eyes flashed with determination. "We fight together or not at all." There was no time to argue. The attackers were approaching the house from multiple directions now. Zach and Olivia retreated inside, securing the door behind them. "Upstairs," Zach directed. "Better vantage point." They moved quickly to the second floor. From the windows, they could see the entire yard. The deputies and ranch hands had taken cover behind wagons and water troughs, exchanging fire with Thornton's men. The barn was already ablaze, flames illuminating the scene in hellish orange light. "There," Olivia pointed. A large figure was dismounting behind the well house, moving stealthily toward the rear of the main house. "Thornton," Zach confirmed. "He's trying to flank us." He made a quick decision. "Stay here, cover the front, I'll head him off." Before she could protest, he moved to the back stairs that led to the kitchen. Drawing his revolver, he descended quietly, listening for any sound of intrusion. The kitchen was dark, moonlight casting long shadows across the floor. He heard the soft creak of the back door opening. A large silhouette appeared, gun first, then the bulk of a man Zach would recognize anywhere. Jacob Thornton had aged in prison, his once black hair now gray, but his massive frame was unchanged. "I know you're in here, Irwin," Thornton's voice rumbled through the darkness. 7 years I waited for this moment. 7 years thinking about what I'd do when I found you." Zach remained still, calculating angles, waiting for the right moment. "You took everything from me," Thornton continued, moving further into the kitchen. "My freedom, my men. Now I'm going to take everything from you, starting with that pretty rancher lady." The mention of Olivia sparked a cold fury in Zach. He stepped from the shadows, gun aimed directly at Thornton's chest. "That's not going to happen." Thornton's reaction was quicker than Zach anticipated. He fired, the bullet grazing Zach's arm, then lunged forward, knocking the gun from Zach's hand. They crashed into the kitchen table, sending dishes shattering to the floor. Thornton was stronger, but Zach was faster. He landed several quick punches to Thornton's ribs before the bigger man caught him with a blow to the jaw that sent him staggering. "Still quick," Thornton growled, advancing. "But not quick enough." He produced a knife, the same kind of blade that had given Zach his scars years ago. Zach's blood ran cold at the sight of it, memories threatening to paralyze him. Thornton smiled, seeing the effect. "Remember this. I'm going to finish what I started in El Paso." Zach backed away, searching for a weapon. His hand found a cast iron skillet hanging from a rack. He seized it just as Thornton charged, swinging it with all his might. The pan connected with Thornton's skull with a sickening thud, staggering him but not stopping him. Thornton slashed with the knife, opening a cut across Zach's chest. Pain flared, but adrenaline kept him moving. They grappled in the darkness, crashing into furniture, each seeking an advantage. The knife came at him again. Zach caught Thornton's wrist, straining against the other man's superior strength as the blade inched closer to his throat. They were locked together, neither able to break free, the knife trembling between them. A gunshot cracked through the room. Thornton jerked, his grip loosening. A second shot and he staggered backward, blood blossoming across his shirt. He looked down in confusion, then over Zach's shoulder. Olivia stood in the doorway, rifle still aimed, her expression resolute. "Drop the knife." Thornton snarled, lurching toward her with his last strength. Zach tackled him, driving him to the floor. The knife clattered away as they struggled. Despite his wounds, Thornton was still dangerous, his hands closing around Zach's throat. Olivia moved closer, reversing the rifle and bringing the butt down hard on Thornton's head. His grip slackened and Zach rolled free, gasping for air. "Are you all right?" Olivia knelt beside him, her hand gentle on his shoulder. "I told you to stay upstairs," he managed, his voice raw. "And I told you we fight together." She helped him to his feet. "The deputies have captured the other two. It's over, Zachary." Thornton lay motionless on the kitchen floor, blood pooling beneath him. Zach checked for a pulse and found none. The man who had haunted him for years was finally, truly gone. Outside, the fire in the barn had been contained. The wounded were being tended to, and the sheriff had arrived with additional men. In the aftermath, as dawn broke over the Circle H, Zach found himself sitting on the porch steps, a bandage around his arm, another across his chest. Olivia sat beside him, her own hands bandaged where splinters from the rifle had cut her palms. They watched in silence as Thornton's body was loaded into a wagon for transport to town. "It's really over," Zach said, still not quite believing it. "Yes." She took his hand. "What happens now?" He looked at her, this remarkable woman who had stood beside him, fought beside him, believed in him when he couldn't believe in himself. "Now I keep a promise I made to myself years ago." "What promise?" "To start living again if I ever got the chance." He turned to face her fully. "Olivia, I don't have much to offer, just a scarred ex-lawman with a complicated past. But if you'll have me, I'd like to stay. Here, with you." Her smile was like sunrise breaking through clouds. "I was hoping you'd say that. It won't be easy," he warned. "I've got demons that don't disappear overnight. And I've got a ranch that needs work, debts to pay, and my own share of nightmares." She leaned closer. "But together, I think we can handle it all." When he kissed her, it felt like coming home after a long, dark journey. The scars that had defined him for so long, the visible ones, and those hidden deeper, no longer seemed like marks of shame but proof of survival, just as she had said. Proof that he had endured, persevered, and now, finally, found his way back to life. 3 years later, the Circle H ranch had been transformed. New fences enclosed expanded pastures, a larger herd grazed the hillsides, and the once struggling ranch had become one of the most prosperous in the territory. The barn had been rebuilt, bigger and stronger than before. The ranch house had a new wing, and laughter could often be heard from within its walls. Zachary Irwin stood on the porch, watching as his wife guided their 2-year-old daughter on her first pony ride in the corral. Olivia's patient hand steadied little Sarah as the child giggled with delight, her dark hair so like her mother's flying in the breeze. "Not too fast," he called, though he knew Olivia would never let anything happen to their daughter. "She's fine," Olivia called back, her smile bright in the summer sun. "She's a natural, just like her father." Pride swelled in his chest as he watched them. If anyone had told him 3 years ago that he would find this happiness, a family, a home, purpose, he wouldn't have believed it possible. The scars on his face had faded somewhat with time, but they would always be there, a reminder of all he had overcome. As the evening approached, they sat together on the porch swing, Sarah asleep in Olivia's arms while the ranch hands tended to the evening chores. The setting sun painted the Colorado sky in shades of gold and crimson, a sight that never failed to move him. "Penny for your thoughts," Olivia said softly, leaning against his shoulder. "Just thinking how lucky I am." He brushed a strand of hair from her face. "How close I came to riding right past Fort Collins that day. I'd have found you eventually," she teased. Some things are meant to be, he smiled, knowing she was probably right. Olivia Harrington, now Olivia Irwin, had a way of making the impossible seem inevitable. She had seen past his scars to the man beneath, the man he could become. Had believed in him when he couldn't believe in himself. "No regrets?" he asked, his arm tightening around her shoulders. She looked up at him, her green eyes as bright and determined as the day they'd met. "None. Every step, every scar, every struggle led us here. And here is exactly where I want to be." As the last light faded from the sky, Zachary Irwin kissed his wife, held his daughter, and knew with absolute certainty that he had finally found his place in the world. Not despite his scars, but because of them. They had marked his journey, shaped his path, and ultimately led him home,